Now, been having quite a few conversations, Bill, in recent weeks regarding the
Yeah.
wildfire season. We kind of teed this up a little bit earlier on, talking about some comments from one of our renowned wildfire experts at Thompson Rivers University. Well, let's dig a little deeper into
Yes.
the conversation. And to do that, we are joined on the line now by Canada's Minister of Emergency Preparedness. It is Harjit Sajjan. Minister, good morning. How are you here today?
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. And I'll just start with maybe where your head is at as the federal minister looking ahead to this summer. I asked Mike Flanagan, our wildfire expert here in town last week, sort of what is your level of concern as we head towards the spring? And on a scale of 1 to 10, he said, well, as far as the early part of the year goes, I'm kind of on a 9 of the worry scale, which, did kind of raise my eyebrows, sounded the alarm bells a little bit in my brain. But where do you stand on a national scale? Are you, pretty darn worried as we look at drought conditions across the nation and kind of what we saw last year maybe happening again in 2024?
No, I would have to agree. I am very concerned about the where this year's wildfire season can go, given what took place even last year, because the predictions that we're getting from the analysis that's done on what the temperatures will be. So it is very concerning. And if you also look at multiple provinces at a very close time period being under threat, that does stretch resources. But nonetheless, just like last year, we were able to coordinate the appropriate support. And more importantly, we've taken the lessons from last year and I'm going to apply it to this year. And we're already making the adjustments now. But I am very concerned about the wildfire season that's potentially to come.
Now, how about those adjustments? What exactly is being done?
So some of those things that we're looking at is one is making sure that we have first and foremost coordination, and it sounds like a simple thing to do, but just imagine this: coordination is just making sure you can communicate with the right people very quickly can save a considerable amount of time. So coordination from the federal level, provincial and municipal. What I always find is that the municipal and provincial coordination is absolutely crucial to get the analysis of what type of support needs to be provided, and then making sure at the higher levels, as you're monitoring the situation at the local level, you're able to get the resources ready to go. So rather than waiting to get the request, you're already monitoring, and we're doing that all the way to the federal level. That's what we were doing last year, and we need to get better at that. Part of it also is making sure that we have more resources. We have now trained up to about approximately 500 firefighters through NRCan. We have about 150 Indigenous firefighters also trained through the Fire Guardian program. Plus, we're just creating a greater awareness and knowledge. So a lot of work is taking place in those areas. And then we're also focusing on the adaptation work as well. Now, the prevention side is obviously going to take a little bit longer, so we want to be focused on the response itself. But we are never taking our eye off the ball when it comes to prevention itself. So the Fire Smart program is going to be absolutely essential. The Fire Smart program, where it was actually utilized, it had a significant impact. So if you take it, for example, the West Kelowna fire, I visited actually fairly quickly with the premier during that time. Mm-hmm. You can see homes that were use the Fire Smart program with the neighborhoods. They actually were protected. And so we knew that certain communities were already starting to increase the Fire Smart program. And one of the things what I'd like to do is get the analysis done of what type of Fire Smart program is needed across the country. Each province is going to be very unique, especially when it comes to the Northwest Territories or up in the High North. So putting those measures in place will allow us to not only be more responsive, but more importantly, be focused on the prevention side as well.
Yeah, and when you talk about coordination and being able to, share resources, I think we do a fairly good job of that as a nation. But I just wonder how much room there is for improvement, and if there has been more talk about the idea of a national wildfire fighting service of some kind, not to replace what we're doing provincially, but more to support it. I just wonder if there is something that could be done on a more national level. 75% of Canadians, according to a recent poll, saying they would support some sort of a national wildfire fighting service. Where is the federal government in looking at that? And obviously, like I said, it wouldn't replace what's happening provincially. It would just be kind of supplemental to it.
Good. And also, I'm glad you mentioned that. It has to be supplemental. That's the key thing. First and foremost, if you want to get ready for any wildfire season, if you look at the cycle, it's not a long time. The wildfire season technically didn't even end, but it slowed down probably in November, gave people some breathing space. So all that time, you have to not only do your preparations, but you have to get ready as well. So the fastest way to to be more effective for any wildfire response, you need to make sure that you put more resources where it's actually needed. So that's right at the local level. So that's what we're focusing on that. So and then when it comes to the federal response, yes, we are looking at a number of options, and the national wildfire kind of responses is something that we're looking at. But we need to make sure that it's going to work because it's easy to say, hey, listen, let's have a national system in place where we have firefighters ready to go. But ultimately, what we're really doing is making sure that the the firefighters and equipment can get to the right areas. That level of the system that will eventually develop. First and foremost, I want to take a look at what has worked with our international partners. The U.S. is a very different system from what the Europe is using, especially when it comes to Germany. And I'll be looking at visiting some of those areas to see what they use. We have to look at our own geography itself. But first and foremost, we have to make sure that anything that we put into place always meets one criteria, which is making sure we have the right resource at the right place at the right time. So there's a number of things that we're kind of working on. It's too early for me to say, but what I will say is it has to be the resources have to be at the local level, but we need to have more involvement at the federal level to be able to get that coordination and have the right resources there. So there's a number of models that we're looking at. We're doing a pilot project in British Columbia on one of those models, and so we'll see, what we learn. But one thing I can say is we will have more support, resources at the federal level as the years go by.
Now, as far as at the local level, what kind of asks would the federal government have on a municipality such as Kamloops as far as being prepared on that local level so you can work with them in a more coordinated fashion?
Well, I think Kamloops is an unfair example because they have the provincial wildfire coordination center that's actually there.
Right.
But when you look at other municipalities that don't have that level of support, first and foremost is every city municipal council that gets elected needs to be trained on whether it's incident command or emergency management system, so that they know what their responsibilities are. Need to have emergency plan in place. Anticipate what type of disaster that you might have to deal with, so that if something does happen, first of all, you need to be able to detect what is taking place, making sure that it's reported to the right places. And in this case here, it has to be the Provincial Emergency Response Operations Center, and then the right resources have to get in the right place. So I'll give you a quick example. In some cases, there could be a wildfire that takes place, but if you don't put the right resource on it, it's not going to be put out. And then all it takes is one shift of wind can push it towards a town, and then you're in a significant emergency situation. So that incident command system training is going to be very important. What type of resources is needed at that local level based on what the threats that they're dealing with? And then also what type of mitigation that needs to be done. So when it comes to wildfires, what type of fire smart program? One of the things I was actually learned when I was in the Soyuz, when I was talking to the mayor and visited with the fire chief, is their industrial park. They had fuel tanks in certain portions, of the town, which made perfect sense. You want to keep it away from certain areas, but the wildfire itself put that in jeopardy. And if that was endangered, they would have had to evacuate the entire town. So a simple thing of planning now, where should some of those important resources need to go so that it doesn't create a greater concern of safety for that population. So those are the things that we're going to be working on. We have a few initiatives in place on how we can support the provinces across the country to provide greater support at the municipal level. Some provinces are more aggressive on this than others. So we had about a couple of weeks ago, all the provincial and territorial emergency preparedness ministers get together, especially with the Indigenous leadership as well, to discuss some of those things of what are the changes that we need to make. First and foremost, they said is we need to make sure that the resources go down to the local level, and then the province will also have to take a look at it. The system that's in place, does it meet the time, the crisis that we're dealing with when it comes to climate change? And so I would say that some provinces have a very good system in place. And what we want to do is encourage the provinces and territories to learn from one another. I think BC has a pretty good system in place. I've been very impressed with Alberta as well. But each province itself, and this is one thing I want to really do stress, is not just about wildfires. It's something that we deal with every single year, but we also deal with floods. In some parts of the province, hurricanes is a significant issue. Flash floods, which is different than the regular floods, is also very different. Mm-hmm. We're normally used to floods where the significant snowfall and with the melting of the snow can create a more flood. But we're also seeing now flash floods hit places. We need to be ready for those. Plus, let's not forget, and especially here in the Lower Mainland, we need to be ready for any type of earthquake as well. So when we look at the type of resources or system that we want to put in place, we're not just looking at wildfires. We're looking at the totality of all the different emergencies. And I would say the last thing we need to say is we just came through a health pandemic. We also need to make sure that we're prepared for that as well.
Well, I will pretty much wrap up here because we're almost out of time. But I did want to ask, as we kind of go through all of that and try to digest that as best as possible, how on earth do we possibly fund all of this? Like, I'm not worried that this work's not going to get done, regardless of whether the money is there or not. I know, like, fires are going to put out and people are going to do the work to recover from floods and that kind of thing. But, like, BC alone, it was, almost $820 million last year to fight fires. Obviously, we didn't have the money or budget to deal with that. How do we deal with this as a federal government to ensure that the ballooning costs year over year are only getting worse? And I just wonder if we're going to be able to keep up the way things are going.
It's a great question. I would say is the prevention is going to be very important for the analysis that we have is that for every dollar that you spend on prevention, you're saving close to about $7 to $10. And that's something that we've already seen. So that's why we're very early on, as we're talking about response, I think every single year we need to get better at prevention. That's why some of there is a federal program in place through the Ministry of Infrastructure that looks at adaptation and mitigation. So that funding is very important. So we're working very closely with them to looking at prioritizing the various projects where are they going to be needed, and plus the provinces are also doing their part. But we all need to coordinate all our efforts and prioritize the funding so that we do get better at prevention. But I can say that work is going, and I have to say we do need to do more. But the thing is, we need to do it in the right way and at the right place. And that's making sure to allowing the scientists to do their work and taking that analysis and putting the right preventative measures in the right place.
Minister, thank you so much for joining us here. It's kind of a good time to have this conversation as we sort of talk about planning for the future and some hypotheticals. Probably next time we get you on, it'll be a lot more what's happening here and now. And I'm not looking forward to that necessarily, but I definitely am looking forward to chatting with you again down the line. Appreciate the time this morning, though.
Look forward to it. Thank you.